We can talk now to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm keen to kind of deep dive into the Northern Ireland situation in a moment, but just to start with Ukraine. Two British men sentenced to death, we're told, after being falsely accused of being mercenaries in Ukraine. It's alongside a Moroccan national as well. We're talking to a friend of his later on the programme. What is the government doing to try and help these men?
Well, I mean, it's as the Foreign Secretary said, it's effectively a kind of sham trial, really. And I think it backs up what we've all seen is this abhorrent process that Putin has followed in terms of an unwarranted attack on Ukraine and the general way that Putin's regime is acting. It's pretty despicable, actually. We're working with the Ukrainians. These are the people who are serving as in the Ukrainian armed forces. They're protected, therefore, under the Geneva Convention. And I know the Foreign Secretary is in close contact with her counterparts in Ukraine to do everything we can to support the individuals and support and work with Ukraine to get the right outcome to this disgraceful situation. But it sums up pretty much the abhorrent way that Putin and his regime have acted over the last few months.
You know, as you say, it's a show trial. They've been falsely accused of being mercenaries. Is there anything we can actually do?
Well, as I say, it's difficult to go into the details of any particular case, and obviously particularly without consent of the individuals. But the Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister, I know, are fully engaged on this, working with the Ukrainians because they were serving the Ukrainian armed forces, and therefore they are protected by the Geneva Convention, something that all governments around the world have respected for decades now. And it's something that Russia should respect as well. But as we've seen, as I say, we've seen Putin act in a pretty abhorrent and illegal way consistently over the last few months. So we've got to keep that pressure on and do everything we can to support not just these families, but actually everybody who's fighting for democracy, actually, in Ukraine.
I guess that's the issue, though, isn't it? You said that Putin is prepared to act illegally. Given that, is there something we can do or not? Well,
we've got to keep the pressure on. We've got to work through this in the proper way, and that's working with our partners in Ukraine, because, as I say, they were serving officers in the Ukrainian armed forces. We will be continuing to do that. I know the Foreign Secretary, as I say, is in close contact with her counterparts there to do everything we can, as I say, to support not just those individuals, but actually the wider people of Ukraine in the battle that they're dealing with Putin's invasion.
We're seeing some pretty worrying reports coming out of the fighting currently happening in Ukraine, in the Donbass. Reports that they're running out of ammunition, heavy losses, of course, a difficult phase of the war. Do you think the tide is starting to turn against Ukraine?
Well, look, but one of the things we've seen is Ukraine has consistently been able to hold up its defence and to actually put pressure on Russia and slow Russia's advance, and actually in some cases at times push Russia back a little bit. We're doing our bit to help. Obviously, we're leading that international coalition and putting the support in there. Again, to the great credit of the Defence Secretary and the Prime Minister, they were leading the way from the very beginning and getting support into Ukraine. In Northern Ireland, we're doing our bit in that the NLAWs and Star Street, which is now coming into Ukraine, are developed and produced in Belfast, and I've been very proud to be able to go and visit and see the team there. And people in Northern Ireland are very proud of what Belfast is doing. We've got to keep up that support for the people.
So more weapons, do you think?
Well, we're continuing to send those defensive lethal weapons support into Ukraine, and I think there is an element of just that general support that the Western world, and we in the UK particularly leading on that, can give Ukraine, gives them the confidence that the world is behind them, that they are in the right to defend a sovereign democracy, and we've got to stand by that.
OK. Now, you, of course, are publishing legislation tomorrow on the Northern Ireland Protocol. This, of course, is part of the Brexit deal that this government negotiated. Is it going to contain notwithstanding clauses? Now, these clauses, of course, would effectively override parts of the withdrawal agreement.
Well, I'm not going to go into the specifics of something before we publish it to Parliament, but you are right. We're going to be publishing legislation tomorrow. I would just say, of course, notwithstanding clauses have a particular legal meaning that give clarity to courts if they come to interpret things down the line. But as I say, what we're looking to do is fix the problems we're seeing with the protocol. It's around how the protocol has been implemented, the lack of flexibility we've seen from the EU over the last year and a half of trying to negotiate with them, where they've not really moved at all. And in fact, at the moment, what the EU are proposing would send us backwards from where we are today. That isn't sustainable, and every political party in Northern Ireland wants to see changes to the protocol. We want to fix it so it works for the people in Northern Ireland and respects all aspects of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which at the moment isn't happening.
So, on the notwithstanding clauses, you say that they provide clarity to the courts, effectively by overriding or changing parts of the original agreement.
What we're going to set out tomorrow is a piece of legislation that will rectify the issues that are there in the protocol. We've always said there has to be an agreement between us and the EU. We've got to respect
But the question is, will it contain these notwithstanding clauses?
As I said, I'm not going to detail something before we publish it to Parliament. That's the right thing to do. We'll publish to Parliament the bill tomorrow. What the bill will do is restore all aspects of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
There's three strands to that. To be fair, a year ago, a court in Northern Ireland, the High Court, found that the protocol does abide by the Good Friday Agreement. So I'm not really sure that the argument...
Look, let's be quite specific. I'm sorry, that's wrong. What the court found a year ago is that it doesn't override certain aspects of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in one part. What isn't correct, though, is the Belfast Good Friday Agreement has three strands, both North-South, which at the moment is under pressure and isn't working. The North-South Ministerial Councils do not happen at the moment. That is not functioning. East-West, we know there are issues. Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Over 200 businesses have stopped supplying Northern Ireland, and there's certain products we can't move to Northern Ireland, despite them being for consumption or use within the United Kingdom single markets. That isn't working. And strand one, the fundamental part of that is the institution of Stormont. That is not functioning at the moment. There is no executive working. So all three strands are either broken or under pressure. That's the very thing that the protocol was setting out to protect. It's not doing it. So it's right that we actually repair that.
OK, now, the last time you tried to unilaterally change the Brexit deal to help trade in Northern Ireland, that's in September 2020, you acknowledged that that would break the law, in your words, in a specific and limited way. Will the legislation tomorrow break the law?
So a couple of things, three things actually. First of all, the legislation we'll outline tomorrow is within the law. What we're going to do is lawful and it is correct. But just two other really important points. When I set that out in late 2020, the point we were making was we were giving primacy to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It was about protecting that over and above what was at that point an incomplete withdrawal agreement. But I will also say we, of course, took unilateral action in the spring of last year when we extended the grace periods, and those extensions are still in place. Something you wouldn't agree at the time, but as recognised was actually important.
You say that this is acting within the law. How can we be so sure that it isn't going to break the law? Are you going to publish the legal advice that's based on?
Well, we're setting out the legal basis on which we are taking forward this legislation. I think when people see
What is the legal basis?
When people see the legislation tomorrow, they will see, and we will be setting out our legal position on this. People will see that what we're proposing resolves the key issues within the protocol that don't work. And
so what is the legal basis on which you're publishing this advice?
Well, we have to actually outline what we're doing in a context that is about protecting the integrity of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We've always said the Attorney-General back in 2019 was very clear. Belfast Good Friday Agreement absolute has paramount importance to the UK government. It's the primacy, it's the original thing. It's an international agreement between us and the Irish government that we will always give first priority to.
I'm just trying to work out, just to get onto the law, onto whether or not this is within the law, because for many people this is really important. You're very confidently asserting that this is within the law. So will you publish are you committing to publishing the advice on which that is given?
Well, as I said, first of all, people will see the legislation tomorrow, so they'll see that we're acting within the law, and we as a government will be outlining our legal position and being very clear about why this is absolutely within the law. So
Sir James Eadie is the first Treasury Counsel, effectively the government's sort of top independent legal advisor. Was he asked whether this would break international law?
Look, I'm not going to get into the internals of government advice. That's something we don't do.
But it's important, Sophie, though, isn't it? Because there is a lot of people who look at this and they think this is going to break international law. And actually, rather than just saying it's not going to, the government's got to show it's working.
Well, I'll go further than saying it's not going to. When people see the legislation tomorrow and the government's legal position, they will see that this is working within the law.
So was Sir James Eadie asked whether it would break international law?
The government lawyers are very clear. We are working within the law. The Attorney-General will be setting out the government's legal position on that tomorrow, in line with the bill.
It's quite a specific question. Was he asked whether it would break international law?
You don't have to even ask my word for it. You can see the bill tomorrow and you will see that what we're doing is within the law.
OK. I just guess some people looking at this might think, look, last time you tried to sort of change the protocol in order to change the trade in Northern Ireland, you at least acknowledged that you would be breaking the law.
No,
that didn't go. That didn't go.
Let's be clear. Well, that was before the protocol was agreed. In the autumn of 2020, the protocol, there was no Brexit deal. There was no protocol. What we were setting out is what we would need to do if there hadn't been an agreement. So we were taking an assurance policy and we stood by our word. And once we secured that issue, then we didn't take that clause forward. You didn't take the action.
You're right. But you at least acknowledged that it would be breaking the law. It feels like this time you have effectively managed to you know that it's going to break the law, but you're just not being completely honest with us.
Oh, no, but very straight. Look, as I say, if you go back to the point we were making at the time, we were being very clear that rather than giving primacy to what was at that point no Brexit deal, no trade agreement and an incomplete withdrawal agreement, we were going to give primacy to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. What we are doing now is fixing the issues within the protocol. We accept, we've always been clear, there needs to be a treaty agreement, a protocol between us and the EU. We need to respect the single market, protect north-south trade as well as east-west, and Strand 1, the institution as Stormont, and giving primacy to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We are going to set out legislation tomorrow that will do that within the law.
In 2024, under the Brexit deal, politicians in Northern Ireland will get to vote on whether or not to keep the protocol. It's effectively their kind of exit clause, and it's Northern Ireland politicians who get to make that decision. Is there anything in the bill tomorrow that could override that?
No, in 2024, there is a consent mechanism and a vote for the politicians in Northern Ireland. And one of the things I think gets missed sometimes in this debate is all the political parties in Northern Ireland at the moment are clear the protocol in its current stage doesn't work.
Yeah, I want to come back on that a little bit because it's much more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
That does feel, a slight brushing over.
People often talk about this as one political party, and that's not actually fair. All the party leaders have been very clear, both with me and publicly, there need to be changes to the protocol.
You would accept that 54 of the 90 newly elected MLAs think that the protocol effectively should keep going, that they disagree with the idea that it should be scrapped or you can also be changed.
You can also point to the majority of, from the parties that are designated, obviously there's a larger proportion of those are unionist MLAs, and all the unionist parties are very clear that they want the protocol scrapped altogether. What we're going to do is, as I say, set out tomorrow how we can restore the institutions of Northern Ireland by fixing the problems that are there with the protocol.
Should you not ask, if the principle of consent is so important, the exit clause, you say, won't be overruled, should you not ask the politicians in Northern Ireland to get their approval, if you like, for any unilateral changes that you're willing to make, when you know that actually, the majority of people who've been newly elected, 54 of the 90, don't want to see it scrapped?
Well, look, there's also the last wide poll on this that was done in Northern Ireland a few months ago now, actually, set out 78% of the population in Northern Ireland felt the protocol wasn't working and needed to be fixed. So we as UK government have a responsibility to resolve this issue for all people in Northern Ireland, businesses and the whole community of Northern Ireland, which we're going to do. Obviously, we're in continual contact with all of the political parties. I talk to all the party leaders regularly, and we do as a government talk to all the party
DUP given you
members.
an assurance that if this legislation go through, that they will rejoin power sharing?
No, that's a matter for the DUP. I would expect to see the DUP, when they see us resolving the issues of the protocol, following what they said was their position, which is as they see the protocol issues being resolved, that they would restore the institutions.
But you haven't had that assurance?
But no, that's a matter for the DUP. I hope to see them go back. They should be going back. I have to say, I would have liked to have seen them being nominated as Speaker and a Deputy First Minister already.
How long would you allow Northern Ireland to go without an assembly before calling another election?
Well, there's a set piece of legislation now which gave stability. That came out of the New Decade New Approach Agreement. We passed that earlier this year. That means that the Assembly has 24 weeks for the parties to work together to find a programme of government that they can support. And I've written to all the parties to encourage them to come together to at the very least be doing that work around a programme of government. After 24 weeks, then we have to take a view about whether there is a further election.
Now, let's talk about immigration, shall we? You want to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. The government won a battle in the High Court last week. Do you expect that flight to take off on Tuesday?
Yes, yes, we do. I think it was very good that we won that court case. That's one stage of the process. And I think underlying this is actually a policy and a programme that huge credit to the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister for taking this forward, because it's one that makes it very clear to these abhorrent people who run these modern slavery schemes and these treacherous runs across the channel, that this business model will not work. Although, and it must be broken.
If you're talking about that, it could be said that this is actually an incentive to bring children with you over the seas, isn't it? Because then you won't get sent to Rwanda.
Well, no, it's a very clear message to and this is part of a wider package. You're absolutely right. There is no silver bullet to deal with the issues around illegal immigration. These are criminals who will always be looking at what is the next thing. But it is right, we're clear to them that we're going to break that business model, and what they're doing will not work.
Like, putting aside the kind of government line, are you personally comfortable with this policy?
Yes, I am actually, and I think it is right that we're very clear to people. There are a number of legal routes through which people can come to this country, and that's important for two reasons. One is we've got to make sure that when people come here, we can give them the proper support to be part of our society. But people who are coming illegally, we've got to make sure that these vile gangs know that that will not work and it's not the right way to do it.
Prince Charles has privately described the policy as appalling. Private comments, but they have, of course, appeared in the newspapers. Are you comfortable with the future king openly talking about government policy in this way?
Well, they're not just private comments, they're rumoured private comments. And I think I don't think it's appropriate to comment on what somebody says they might have heard without any context of it. The reality is this is a policy that is going to deliver to ensure that modern slavery and these people smugglers know that their criminal methods will be broken down. And saying to people around the world, if you are a refugee, if you're an asylum seeker, if you're a legal migrant coming to this country, we want to give you the support to properly help you be part of the UK economy, part of the UK way of life, which is what you want, and that's right. But we've got to do that in a proper, legal, managed way. And people who are encouraging you to travel illegally are wrong, and we're going to break their business model.
We're facing a summer of strikes. The Sunday Telegraph reporting that the government could bring in agency staff in order to break the strikes. Grant Shapps saying says you're looking at changing the law to allow employers to effectively use agency staff to break strikes, to cover for striking workers. Is that true?
Well, we're looking at, as Grant has said, look, today actually, we're looking at a whole range of things. I think it's right that we do that. I think it's right that we are looking at everything we can do to support hard-working people who are looking often to get to work, get children to school, get to hospital appointments, not being disrupted by strike action, particularly in a sector where I think the median pay in that sector is almost double what the average pay is for citizens in the UK. So I think it is right that we are on the side of working people and that Grant is rightly looking at all the options.
Would that not be undermining, the people's right to strike?
No, I think it's supporting the general public's right to get to work, to get to emergency appointments, to get to school, to live their everyday life. As I say, we are talking about an industry. As I say, I think the median salary is about 46,000 as opposed to an average salary in the UK of about 26,000. So I think it is right that we are looking to support people who are looking to go about their everyday lives in a normal way, and they have a right to do so.
It's been a pretty difficult week for the Prime Minister. I'm sure you'll acknowledge 41% of Conservative MPs voting to have no confidence in him. He's announced this kind of policy blitz, if you like. He's also hinted very strongly at the prospect of tax cuts. He's described the current tax burden as an aberration. In Tuesday's Cabinet, he said we have the scope by delivering tax cuts to deliver growth. So what kind of tax cuts can we expect?
Well, look, actually, I think what this week highlights is the Prime Minister is getting on with the job. We're continuing to work to deliver for people across the country.
Let's talk about tax cuts.
In terms of tax cuts, look, I'm a Conservative and I believe in a low-tax economy. I think lower tax
must be pretty unhappy with the current situation.
Well, I think what we've always got to look at is how we... But we're also making sure that as of next month, 70% of the population are going to have a tax reduction through the increase in the national threshold. We're making sure... We're making sure that businesses who are making huge profits are incentivised to use that money to go into investment for the future. We've got to make sure that we're using tax in a way that isn't fiscally sensible, because we have had an exorbitant period through COVID where we have supported the public. That costs money. The war in Ukraine, that costs money. We've got to be sensible about this, but doing that in a way that creates a foundation where we can bring in more tax cuts
what tax cuts would you like to see?
Is a good thing for the United Kingdom.
Well, look,
I'm not going to prejudge the chance. That's
always... I'm sorry,
everyone
else isn't.
I've been on your show enough over the years. I've been on your show enough over the years. I'm never going to prejudge the difficult and complicated fiscal decisions the Chancellor has to make. But even before this week, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were clear that as soon as the fiscal situation allows, and we've got to be very sensible about that, we're managing public money after all, we want to see tax cuts, and the Chancellor wants to bring tax cuts in. Some more people have more money in their pocket to spend how they know they can spend it best.
I just want to end by a quote from somebody that I spoke to on Wednesday, on the Wednesday night programme, when we basically talked to a focus panel, if you like, of Conservative voters. This is a guy called John Comerford. He's a pensioner. He's someone who isolated at home during the pandemic. He wasn't able to go to the funeral of loved ones. And he told me this. He said, I voted Conservative all my life, and I wouldn't even think about not voting Conservative, but I cannot vote for Boris Johnson. I just won't vote at all, which at my age, having voted ever since I was 18, would actually disturb me. I mean, this is a man who is effectively desperate to vote Conservative. He can't bring himself to vote for anyone else. He's always voted for Conservative Party since he was 18. He says he cannot do it anymore. I mean, it must be, for Conservative MPs like you, listening to that, it must be pretty upsetting.
Well, I think it's a very clear reminder of the work we've got to do between now and the next general election. And indeed, depending on where he lives, the potentially local elections next year, to convince people like John. Yeah. OK, so he's probably may well have district elections even next year. Our work and the focus for us has to be on working to ensure we can earn his vote at the next election, because it's important for the country.
It's the Prime Minister that he can't vote
for. And actually, and I would like to think that as he'll see over the next year or so, as the Prime Minister is focused on delivering for people in the United Kingdom, giving a better life for people in the future, that he is the right man to lead us into that next general election. I think he is, and I hope that people like John are the sort of people we'll be able to convince to continue to vote for us.
No more law breaking, even tomorrow?
Sorry?
No more law breaking even tomorrow?
We're going to be working within the law, but we are, importantly, going to fix a problem that has been detrimental to the lives of people in Northern Ireland. We have a duty to do that, and it's right that we do it.
OK, thank you very much, Brandon Lewis, there.